everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. All individuals entering city-operated facilities, including City Hall, are required to wear a non-medical face mask. Those at the table are not required to wear masks while sitting as long as they are distant 6 feet from anyone else. Once you leave your seat at the table, you must put your mask back on. As directed by Manitoba Health, we're requesting people avoid close contact within 2 meters with anyone showing symptoms of respiratory illness, such as coughing or sneezing. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. I don't have to read the part on Zoom because it's not an applicant. Correct. Okay. I would like to introduce the members of the panel. To the left of me is Jeff Peach, and on the screen is Stu McPherson. My name is Brent McIntyre, and I'll be chairing the meeting. We have 2 representatives from the Assessment Department, Brittany Santucci and Jeremy Pohl, and our secretary is Balhan Rojo. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Use of cell phones is not permitted except for approval by the chair. Thank you. Stu, just as a bit of housekeeping, 3 of the properties, 1, 2, and 3, are withdrawn. I don't know if you have the full docket there.
I do.
Oh, okay, so you can stroke off 1, 2, and 3 because we'll start at number 4.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Jeremy Reinhold.
Please state your full name.
Antoine François.
And you affirm the evidence about the present the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but
Yes, that's correct.
the truth.
So the first item on our agenda is 4055 Portage Avenue. And Antoine, I just, is this just regarding liability?
So, Mr. Chair, yes, there's no question on quantum, so I would have the onus of presenting first, I think is the proper way to proceed.
Okay, and then Jeremy will respond to you.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
This property and the assessment appeals of this property has a history to it. It's set out in the brief that I filed, the first pages. I put a summary, and perhaps it's useful. It's about 1.5 pages of a summary to actually
get to it.
go to our brief.
So you're starting on the summary page?
Yes, where it says summary,
Yep.
brief and evidence of dairy farmers of Manitoba. As if you have a paper copy or even the electronic copy is fairly extensive, and that's because essentially it's court, a replicate of the court brief.
Material.
In my view, though, what you're going to be deciding this morning is fairly simple. There was one appeal filed by dairy farmers of the 2019 assessment. The board heard that assessment appeal, and on the form of appeal, the liability was ticked off. I explained, and I will explain without going into a whole lot of detail, what I presented that time, and the board agreed that there should be a school tax exemption for that property. Red River Exhibition owns the property. It's exempt as a societal agricultural society, and I had presented information in support of our position that dairy farmers is also an agricultural society, and the board accepted that for that particular year. That requires a secondary change also in classification, because the regulations provide that if you get that school tax exemption, the classification changes to institutional as opposed to other. So there's two aspects with respect to this as set out on the very first page of my summary. Firstly, the school tax exemption under 23(1)(c), and I say no facts have changed. The presentation would be the same. And then the other change is classification, because it's incorrectly shown as other, but a school tax exemption is institutional classification. So that's a section 40. The assessor filed a court application to appeal that decision, but that decision, unfortunately, or that appeal has not been heard by the courts, in part because of COVID. We've been put on hold, except for non-emergency stuff, basically since February. I suggest that given there was no changes, just for purposes of consistency, the board should make the same ruling as a different panel did. I think perhaps the chair was part of the first panel, I don't recall.
I seem to remember it.
But one other point, though, is in 2020, there was also an appeal filed. However, the decision was different by this. And you may ask, well, why was it different? The box liability to taxation was not checked off. And the assessor argued, and the board accepted, that because of that, you didn't have jurisdiction, although there's issues there, but you didn't have jurisdiction to make any finding on liability. The only box that had been checked off was classification. And classification is that section that says, well, if you have a section 23 school tax exemption, you've got to be put to institutional. And so nothing changed. So therefore, we appealed that decision. We've got our own view that the board did have jurisdiction to make a finding, but the board found it did not. So there's two appeals right now to the Court of Queen's Bench, one on a form where we had checked off the liability box, which then resulted in a decision by this board that they couldn't hear the school tax liability issue. And the first one, where the boxes were both checked off, the liability and classification, which allowed this board to make that decision in favor of dairy farmers. All the material is there. I'm seeking a little bit of guidance from the board. I don't want to spend half an hour going through a lot of information if it's not the board's wish to do that. It's basically the same thing that was testified in support of the first application, and it's what's going to be put in front of the court. I can go to some key documents. If I don't know how well it's organized in your materials, but at tab C for Charlie.
I don't think we have tabs on the electronic.
Okay.
No, we don't.
I don't know how many pages that's into the PDF. Members of the board. Page 92.
Okay.
All I'm doing is directing this board to a couple of the papers that are, or documents that I referenced you to. So tab C at page 92, the PDF shows you the application for revision. You'll see it's the year 2019. And you'll see that there were three things checked off: the amount of assessed value, liability, taxation, and classification. And the decision which followed that application is, it would be probably page 94 in your PDF. So it was a different panel: Marcel Larondo, Ron, and Mr. Sawatsky. And as you can see on the bottom, the tax status was changed to tax school exempt. There was no change in the assessed value. That had been an issue there too. I'm going to call it problem application for revision, should be at page
98.
98. And you'll see that one only had the classification checked off by the dairy farmers. And that's why I say the board didn't deal with liability taxation in that particular area, because you can see on that form it wasn't checked off by the client. And then the current application should be then 100.
Yes.
You can see that this current application has both boxes checked off. Here, I apologize, I don't know where it is in the brief. Tab 1 is tab 1, which is an excerpt from the Municipal Assessment Act.
Is that towards the end of the document?
Yes, well, it's in line. It's
Page 113, I believe.
Thanks, Stu.
so after the title page of the statute, I don't know if the title page was page 113. Was it the title page or?
Yes.
Okay, so at page 114, there's various exemptions. And the reason I had put both the farm improvements exemption and then the exemption from school taxes in a very general way, if you look at the exemptions under the Municipal Assessment Act, agricultural things and farm things benefit from school tax exemptions. And section 23 sub 1, which is on page 114 at the very bottom, C, is the exemption that was granted by this board in 2019. It's owned, and that's been interpreted as owned or leased in case law by an incorporated. So we've given you the documents of incorporation that's in this package. Agricultural, well, it's dairy farmers. So we submitted information as to why the link to the agricultural. Dairy is farming, it's agricultural. And then the last thing is a society. We've given definitions, and it's in this brief again. That's a grouping of people, usually for not-for-profit. They get together to promote the best interests of the grouping that they have. We have a bunch of different fraternal societies, and in our and this is an agricultural society. It also gives something for horticultural societies. The argument of the assessor at the previous 2019 hearing, and I think it's being repeated today, is that it has to be an agricultural society, and they want the section to read a bit further, as defined in the Agricultural Societies Act. But that's not the way the section reads. It doesn't say that you have to be under that particular act to benefit from the exemption. And that's contrasted if you look just a little bit higher in A and B. Sometimes the government does want it to be limited to certain types of organizations created under legislation. So if you go under 23(1)A, 2 little i's, you see when they want it to be as defined in a particular piece of legislation, in 1A, 2 little i's, it says a personal care home as defined in the Health Services Insurance Act. And then in B, it's another example of if the legislature wants it to be as defined in a particular piece of legislation, it says a housing unit or hostel as defined in the Elderly and Infirm Persons Housing Act. So that further kind of requirement is not in this subsection C, and that's why we submitted in 2019 that the assessor was wrong in imposing that requirement, because the legislature clearly, if it wants to impose it, has been doing it, and in this section it didn't require it. So we had submitted, and the board had accepted based on our submissions, that it was sufficient to be an agricultural society, which we were, and they gave the exemption. The only other thing that I would think it's perhaps useful just to look at very briefly, and it's at tab 5. I don't know where that's in the PDF page numbers. It's the regulations under the Assessment Act. Do we have a page?
136.
Page 136.
Are you on your call?
I have page 134.
Okay, it starts at 134. So on page 135, there should be the heading institutional property, section 8. And just to bring to your attention why we're asking for the classification change. So the institutional property under section 8B, it says land and buildings or any portion of land and buildings that are exempt under 23(1). That's the section we were just looking at of the Municipal Assessment Act. So it's exempt from taxation for school purposes. That's why the classification also has to change, because it's specifically addressed in the regulations. That would be the end of my presentation. Unless the board wants me to go into more detail on this very extensive document, I leave it to the board. I don't want to make the board feel I'm avoiding giving a complete presentation because it's going to go to the courts. But at the same time, given that it's already made a favorable decision based on the same type of information, I just attempted to give you the history and a very brief presentation as to why we think it's still the proper decision.
Okay, Jeff, do you want any more detail?
I think I'm fine.
You're fine. Stu?
Just clarification on the page 114, 22.2, the farm improvements exemption, you're not suggesting that applies in this case?
No.
You're relying on 23.1.
That's correct. The reason why, when I'm making this presentation, I refer to other farm exemptions is because it's all farmers that form part of the society. And there's a general theme in the Assessment Act where farmers get school tax exemptions and exemptions on various things. And I say it's pretty consistent with that theme that when they get together and put an agricultural society like the dairy farmers of Manitoba, that it's consistent with what the legislature would want. It would be absurd in my respectful view that farmers, because they decide to get together in a grouping, an agricultural society, all of a sudden lose the type of exemptions they normally get as farmers. And that's why I submit that it's not only consistent with the wording, but consistent with how the legislature has approached farming and given them tax breaks. Even the portioning, if you look at portioning for farm property, it's down to 26% compared to other types of properties which are higher portion. That's not an assessment matter, but it gives us a flavor of a favorable treatment towards farmers.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, Stu?
Well, just, I see that Mr. Pohl was the assessor of record in 2019. So he has heard the full argument, although the board hasn't. But I think that any pertinent information that we don't have in front of us will probably come forward with Mr. Pohl's questioning of Mr. Hucko and or his presentation. So I'm okay with this abbreviation version for now.
Okay, Jeremy, you're on.
Capitalization. Yeah. All right. You summarized our 2019 appeal quite accurately.
Jeremy, you can take it off.
Thank you. You summarized our 2019 appeal quite accurately. Our issue is not only not part of the Manitoba Association of Agricultural Societies. They're not listed on their site.
Jeremy, I think you'll have to speak up or move the mic.
Better. Okay. But effectively, what do they do? When it's listed on the Manitoba Business Information Services, dairy farmers in Manitoba effectively act as management and quality control for the group of farmers that they represent, obtaining best market pricing for the product. Correct.
Well, it's not only that, and here actually that then brings me to the fairly long listing of activities that this society does. It starts at page 5 of my brief, and I'm just going to go through the headings. And then I don't want to go too long, but they do educational promotional activities. You'd see that in a lot of societies.
Which page are you on?
Page 5, paragraph 12.
Which
Of the brief.
Started at the top of the brief.
I don't know, but that should probably be page 5 of the PDF.
Yeah, it is. It's at the bottom of page 5.
Page 5 of the PDF?
Yeah.
So I'll just take you through the headings, Mr. Pohl. You asked what do they actually do. There's the heading participation in educational promotional activities. So there's paragraphs 12, 13, 14, and 15, 16, 17, and 18 that describe those activities. And then at page 8 of the PDF, there's another heading, educational opportunities for dairy farmers. So there's various other pieces of information that are given to the farmers that include fall and spring meetings, an annual general meeting, and their annual forum. So there's various things that we've given as far as examples of those activities that they provide for farmers. On page 9 of the PDF, this deals with part of your question, Mr. Pohl. They do have a role in ensuring milk quality that gets distributed in this province. So that farmers who don't comply with that are penalized. But they also have training sessions on improving dairy agriculture. If I go to page 11, this also is one of the points I think you had mentioned in your question. They play a role in supply management. That's to ensure that the farmers receive a fair return. So they've been grouped together for that. They, at page 12 of the PDF, also do dissemination of nutritional resources and publications as it relates to dairy. And the description of those activities continues from page 12 up to page 15 of the PDF. And they also have school milk programs. So they're doing various programs in elementary and high school to develop healthy nutrition by implementing milk in their diets, and particularly while at school. So you can see it's a fairly extensive program. In 2019, there's 340 schools that participated in that. 2019-20, 346. And so there's a lot of activities that this organization put together by the farmers does for the farmers. It's not just quality control and supply options.
That's all the questions I have.
Stu, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Jeff, anything else?
Thank you.
And I have no questions.
Considering that this is already out of the higher court, we're just going to maintain a position that it shouldn't be changed class liability. I'll wait for the decision.
Any timetable on when this is going to be heard? I'm just curious.
Well, I have had some communication with the lawyer for the province. One of the challenges, the quick answer is no. We would have hoped to have a decision of the court before coming here again, because having this issue have uncertainty for this long for both the city and both for the dairy farmers is unhealthy. You need to have a decision from someone. But what's happened in the courts is I've had court proceedings that were actually put off. And then what they've done is they've tried to prioritize urgent stuff. And all the stuff that's been put off has bumped off other stuff. I would hope that early in 2021, we get the attention of the court and get a decision from the court. And then it depends how quickly the courts give decisions. Some judges do it in 2 or 3 months, and some take, unfortunately, a lot longer than that. I've had cases where they take a year to give us a decision, which is unfortunate. That's a long answer, but the best answer.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. So nothing else further to add, gentlemen? Then that concludes this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have to sanitize that workstation. Right? Or Trevor, did you want to just take a 5-minute break to do that? Sure. We'll just take a 5-minute break to clean the workstation. The next one on the docket is 1400 Henderson Highway, and the application is with respect to assessed value only, just to confirm. Okay, Brittany, you may proceed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's my downfall.
Please state your full name.
Trevor Smith.
You are from the Evans about to present the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, you're on.
So this is file number 20-415. Roll number 04001603-600. Address is 1400 Henderson Highway. This is an office building. We have an actual year built is 1956, effective year built 1972. And then we have a portion of it is 2007, so I'm not sure if that's part of an addition. Okay, so that's my page 1. If we turn to page 2, I just have an aerial shot of the property, just located on Henderson Highway, close to Sutton Ave. And I have exterior photos. I do not have any interior photos, and I couldn't find a date of the last time someone was in this building. So that's definitely something that could be looked at going forward. So they're on my page 3, the request for information. Just to let you know, it was previously owned by the city of Winnipeg, so there was no income and expense mailers previously submitted. And there was a post-reference sale. And then, so I don't know anything to do with the subject property leases for this property when this brief was created. So on my page 4, I have the office income stream. We have a leasable area of 4,700 square feet. The rent per square foot is $14.06. We have a vacancy loss of 5.5%. Fences at 2, short call at $7 per square foot. For a net operating income of $59,388. Overall capitalization rate of 6.2%. For an estimated we have an additional land value as well for $437,000 for an estimated value of $1,395,000. So at the bottom of my page 4, I have the rent comparables. The first 6 are located on Henderson Highway, and the last 2 are located on Main Street. We have an average of $13.88 and a median of $13.74. So slightly lower than the rent we've applied to this property. On my page 5, I break down the additional land value. So the total land for the whole property is 35,383 square feet. The additional land value is a portion that's 100 by 150 feet for 15,000 square feet, which you divide by the land value of the $437,000 to get $29.13 per square foot. So I have some land sales on my page 5, 7 of them. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any on Henderson Highway that were applicable with a reference date. I found some on Main Street, Regent, and Plessis, and they range from $20.69 all the way up to $32.61, with an average of $27.24 and a median of $29.21. So just I'll take you back to page 2. So for the aerial shot, the land is just to the left of the building. So the building is kind of more located to the north of the parcel, and then it's the south portion of the parcel. Page 6 is just the income value summary. Page 7 is the capitalization rates. 8 is the Municipal Assessment Act, and then page 9 is the City of Winnipeg, the 2020 Board Revision Addenda, which I've included, which everybody's seen. Just to kind of go over what we've done. I know everybody's heard all the arguments, so we have the 2% non-recoverable. And I think that's my presentation. So my recommendation is just to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $1,395,000. Thank you.
Trevor, questions?
Yes, just a few. So you had mentioned that you're not sure when the last time the property was inspected.
Not by anybody in our department.
Okay, so it's fair to say that you haven't had the opportunity to see inside yourself.
No, and when I looked at the sale, I couldn't find interior photos. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. In looking at in looking at the income stream breakdown on page number 4, then typically when there's different spaces, my experience is that the city breaks it down by space when they're applying a rent to it. But you just have the 4,700 square feet grouped together here as a single unit, right? But it is over 2 floors, correct?
From what I looked at the floor plans, yes.
Yes. So half of that will be in the basement.
To me, I thought it was a raised basement. Is it higher, like a more of a bi-level basement? Is that?
Well, I'll get into the photos of it in mine. It's the basement issue is always entertaining, but I'll show
For sure.
I'll show the photos of it so that you can see it as well.
Sure. But yes, I agree. It's 2 levels.
Okay. So the city has applied blanket $14 across the whole space. Okay. And the rental rate comparables that are at the bottom there, do we know do we know what the tendencies are for these, or what the just in terms of being able to provide a bit more detail? Yes. I'm not sure which ones these are. I didn't have a chance to get into them. Sorry, can everybody hear me? I may not be speaking into the mic. Can you hear me, Stu?
I can hear you fine. Thank you.
So the first one would be a camping association on 1215 Henderson. Then there's a travel. We have an insurance at 230 Henderson. A city tenant for 1110 Henderson, Unit 12. I'm not sure, just an office tenant for 1106. Medical for 899 Henderson. And for the Main Street, we have an education center for the first one, and then a survey for the second.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeff, any questions?
None at this time. Thanks.
Stu?
Just a couple clarification on your rent comps. I see it says floors 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. That's just the building itself. That's how many floors in that particular building?
Yes, the number in the building.
So do we know where these are located in the building? Like, for instance, 1110 Henderson, comp 4, it's a 3-story building. Is that on the main, second, or third?
That one's not on the main. I didn't think it was on the main floor. And then comp 5 was on the main floor. For the comp 6 to 8, they're just on the main floor. 230 Henderson Highway, they occupy the whole building. And then for 1215 Henderson, I'm not 100% sure, but I thought they were on the second floor.
Okay. So the only one that's a standalone building is 230 Henderson, comp number 3?
And then from my understanding, comps 6 to 8 are also just one single tenant.
Those are all single tenant as well?
Yes.
Thank you. And just for your excess land, the $29.13, that's pretty precise. Is that model generated, or do you know? It is model generated?
Yes.
Thank you. And what is the normal land to building ratio for a OFS type building? Is there a normal?
I think under 10 is kind of what we've been, at least from like my understanding of the last appeal cycle. So this one's at 14.65, but I think they'd be closer to like around 5 to 10 maybe, depending on where they're located, either the downtown versus suburb, where they look like working.
Right. Well, yeah, you wouldn't expect a high land to building downtown, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But in the suburbs you might. So if you say normally 5 to 10, so anything over 10, that's when you consider an excess land, or?
And then the configuration of the land for this one.
Okay, and
more of a separate parcel.
Okay, and you're feeling that it could be easily subdivided.
That's what I had read previously from when it was completed like that, yes.
Okay, I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just have two questions. The original age is 1956 and effective year 2007.
So it's actually, it's a bit confusing when you look at this. So the 1956 and the 1972 are linked. And then the second portion that was added on would be the 2007. So that would be, whenever there's the dash, there's always the separate part of a building.
Now, there was obviously something done to this building.
Yes,
Did you look into the permits?
it did. It was a city building and I couldn't find anything specific.
I think I know one. Thank you. My second question was your cap rate of 6.2. Now, this is at the low end of your chart for suburban B,
Yes, it would be.
even though the original age of the building is 1956.
Yes. And that would just be the model.
Is this model driven?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Trevor, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. So as already mentioned, the subject property was a City of Winnipeg owned property since its beginning, I believe, in 56. It may have had an original owner that was different, but the city has owned it for quite some time prior to its post-reference sale to the current owner. The last occupant of the property from the city was the Winnipeg Police Department. They occupied the space through into 2017 and operated their local unit out of that particular space, at which time they vacated. So the property has subsequently sold post-reference in 2019, and it has been purchased by the new owners as a redevelopment site. Essentially, they are not intending to continue on the use of the existing structure, and they intend to redevelop the site, as you'll see from some of the photos. So that's a bit of background for you. Let's flip into my brief to page number 1. The chart at the top of the page gives you a bit more detail here. Obviously, we're looking at an office building, total leasable area of 4,700 square feet, with the site size a little over 35,000 square feet, with the original age of 1956. So when I did a search of the online city system, the property attributes page for the property, it only identifies construction date of 1956. So the original date of construction is that time frame. It had no other additions to it. This is speculation, so take it for what it's worth. I believe it's renovations that we're looking at since that time frame. So the 2007 issue is very likely the renovations that occurred to it, unless they put an awning over the exterior entrance or something of that nature. But it's not an addition to the building, to my knowledge. So that is the background. Let's get into the pictures. So beginning on page number 2, we have the frontage. Looking at the property from Henderson, then I have a photo looking north from the side street showing you the site area. So obviously there's fairly significant site area that is currently undeveloped. Then we can get into the interior. So again, we're looking at 2 equal-sized floors here with a stairwell access between the 2, and stairs indeed up to the main floor from the exterior. So the top photo on page number 3, that is what the entire above ground floor looks like. It has the flooring as shown, the ceilings as shown. It's painted drywall, drop acoustic ceiling. It's wide open like that. That pretty much encompasses the main floor. So going down into the basement level, we have the remainder of the photos on the interior here. So there's a photo of the washroom space. Again, this was built out for city purposes originally. So there is an older shower there, obviously. We have some individual office spaces off of a relatively narrow hallway, as you can see. A shot of the mechanical room, which had an issue with water seepage from the outside, I believe. And then just a shot of the main area in the basement at the top of page number 5, and then a shot of the current owner's sign on site that they are seeking to redevelop the site. So that basically covers the property. Now, as I've stated, the owners themselves have no intent to reuse the building. They have put some very temporary tenancies in place on a very informal basis. Information was not available with regard to any payments that are being made from the parties. I know that there was, given the current health situation in Manitoba and elsewhere with COVID-19, there was a need for some testing sites and Dynacare, I believe, was put in place here because it was in the correct area, and they made use of this space for some time. I don't believe they're operational there anymore. The owner has a cultural link to a tenant that is temporarily occupying the basement space for their flooring or carpeting company. But again, these are very informal things. They're not ongoing, and any payment is not really indicative of market. So let's move on. Page number 6 gives you the layout of the site. So the office building itself is located on the northeast corner, fronting on Henderson. You can see the extent of the site. It is fairly large. I don't disagree that there is some additional value for this particular property. Page number 7 gives you the location of the property on Henderson Highway to the south of Chief Peguis Trail. Let's move forward to the valuation itself. So key thing in this today, I think, is arriving at a fair rent for a property that was originally built in '56, has stair access, not elevated, half of the space being basement space. So what would be a fair market rent for that? So we provided our rental rate comps on page number 10, and then I've provided a couple of photos on the following page. So the first two, 755 Henderson, this is a newly built structure in 2015. It's a very good quality building, has elevator access, street front parking, very nice building. The draw, the tenant draw for that building, and I can state this knowledgeably because our firm is doing the leasing for the owner. It's been very difficult to lease this space up. It's been an ongoing issue, so they've been quite challenged. So beautiful space on Henderson, closer to downtown, and they've been quite challenged in putting tenancies in there. So the first one, they had a lease in 2016 for $16 a square foot, 3,700 square feet. This is a dental office, so there's greater degree of build out, so the rents tend to be higher for those. Then the second one, 2018 lease, 5-year term, 5+ year term at $12 a square foot for a 1,200+ square foot tenant. So you're getting $12 a square foot for a brand new tenancy, or rather a brand new building on Henderson Highway closer to downtown. Then we have 929 Nairn, 1421 Gross. You can see the property there. That is a second floor office tenant in that space. The net would be considerably lower than that. That property was built in 55 and has had exterior upgrades and other things since that time, but it's fairly dated on the second floor. And then 1807 Henderson, built in 1950 and 65, 2014 lease at 7.25. So slightly older lease, obviously, 2,500 square feet, similar to the floor plate of the subject, $7.25 a square foot net. So that's what we're looking at. I've included our Cushman and Wakefield brokerage's second quarter of 2018 office market beat publication. This is public knowledge. It's available on our website. And it covers off both vacancy and average net rental rates by category of office space. So if you look into the details here, into the bottom half, you can see the Class A through C suburban spaces. Class B suburban, which would be significantly nicer than this, they have $15.07 as an average net rental rate. Class C suburban, which you could theoretically put the subject within, has an average rate of $11.61 a square foot on a net basis. So looking at that, as well as our rental comps, we have optimistically placed a net rental rate of $12 a square foot on the above ground space. Again, keep in mind the new space at 755 Henderson. We have a space of about half the size that rented for $12 a square foot. And for the basement space, we've placed a rental rate of $8 a square foot on the space. It is built out. There is an access to it. It could be rented. So we have, again, placed what I feel would be an optimistic rental rate of $8 a square foot on this. So that gives us our revenue of $47,000. It averages out to $10 a square foot. There is no parking revenue or signage revenue on site. Moving on to the expense side, vacancy, I've provided significant data on this at the top of page 13. If we look at the chart going down to Class C suburban, both Colliers and Cushman Wakefield have data included for that category. Cushman and Wakefield has an 8.1% vacancy rate for Class C. Colliers has significantly more at 16.22. If you look at suburban vacancy, office vacancy overall, ranging between 6.2% and 8.01%. So with roughly an average of 7%. Subject property has interim tendencies, half the space is in the basement. We've used a vacancy rate of 8%. I think it's well supported by the market data provided. I think we have gone through the issue with regard to the expense allowance hundreds of times with everybody present, so I will not go through the painful process of going through that detail for us here today. If you look in the addenda, I provided significant background with regard to decisions supporting the re-inclusion of the 5% expense as well as the 2% expense in decisions taken by this panel. So it is our expectation that that will continue forward and reflect the market. Moving on, shortfall allowance, we really have no data on that, so we have utilized the city's $7 per square foot, and we can move forward to capitalization rate. Now, subject property It is was obviously purchased for redevelopment, so I think it is somewhat indicative that the property was not bought for reuse of the existing structure, that they felt that highest and best use of the property would be to demolish and redevelop the site. Gives you an indication of the demand for such a property, or rather such a building as this. And indeed, that is what we're valuing. We're not valuing the future development potential of it. We're valuing what's there today. So if you look at the top of my page 15, I've included capitalization rate ranges as provided by the three main national brokerages present in Winnipeg. They don't cover the Class C suburban market, as it's not typically considered an investment grade property. So the subject would not fall typically within those ranges, or be classified as Class A or B suburban. However, just to look at the data, if you look at Class A suburban, Cushman and Wakefield is stating we have roughly a range of 6.25% to 6.75%. CB Richard Ellis having a range of 6.5 to 7%. Class B suburban being 6.75 to 7.5 for Cushman Wakefield, 6.5 to 7.25% for Colliers, and CB Richard Ellis at between 7 and 7.5. Now, I should point out again, of course, that these are the brokerages. I won't call them promotional capitalization rate ranges, but this is partly a marketing piece for them. So when they're taking properties to market, this is generally what they will fall between when they're capitalizing them. Whether they achieve that is a different matter, which is where the actual evidence comes in following that. So not saying they're wrong, I'm just saying this is the optimistic end of the spectrum. So subject property is Class C office property at the best, obviously not tracked. We've provided a capitalization rate chart for other office properties at the bottom of page 15, and our range, wide range, obviously, of size, age, value, construction date, etc. Our range goes from a low of 6.2% up to a high of 10%, but generally you're seeing properties in the 6.75%, 7%, 7.25%, 8.7 is typically what we're seeing out in the marketplace. Looking at the subject property, it's a relatively small building. It could have some attraction to owner occupants. There is a large site, which I have taken into account in looking at the capitalization rate applied. So I have used certainly the low end of the scale at 6.25% to capture the value of the subject. With regard to additional land, absolutely there is some additional potential to this site. We are not in disagreement with that. I looked at the city's valuation and how it was arrived at, and I'm not in disagreement with that. So we've included an additional land value of $437,000 in our value. Flipping to page 16, you can see the summary of the two. Our overall combined rental rate of $10 a square foot, 12 on the main floor, 8 in the basement, versus 14 for the city. 7% vacancy based on the market stats. Again, our building will largely be vacant. and 6.25% cap, giving us $613,000 in income value, plus the additional land value gives us a rounded market value of $1,051,000. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany?
Just a few questions. So you said that there's temporary tenants, but you're not sure who's currently, is there, so there's possibly one person there?
Well, if you look at, and I will have a correction to make here now that I look at the cover page again. The Dynacare tenancy again was a very temporary thing related to COVID. They are not in occupancy on the main floor anymore, so that is vacant, as you can see from the photos. And the tenant, very temporary tenant in the basement, again has a cultural connection to the new ownership of the property. So they're in there on a very informal basis as well. And I would like to, I think, probably offer a correction and perhaps apology, as it looks like potentially the 2007 edition is shown right on the front of the building, which appears to be a wheelchair lift and is certainly newer than 1956. So that would be what that represents.
Thank you. Jeff?
How long have these folks been a client of yours?
I have done a property of theirs on Osborne.
I was thinking this property.
For this property?
Yeah.
Brand new.
Brand new. Okay.
Yeah, they bought it in 2019.
So prior to the tenancy related to the COVID, are you then saying it was a vacant property?
It would have been vacant. I don't officially know when the police moved out. Others may know, have more detail on that than I do, but it would certainly be vacant from sometime in 2017 through the sale in 2019, late 2019.
And that was the entire property was vacant? It looks like there's two tenants in there. Do you have a sense? I guess what I'm trying to get at is what is the actual historical vacancy of the
So it would have been fully occupied as a city property.
Yeah.
And the city, to my knowledge, they occupied the property through 2017. The police were in there. I don't know when they started, but for a number of years, maybe 2010-ish. Prior to that, I don't remember what city department would have been in there and whether there were any gaps, but it was a city-owned property. So
subsequent to, so since 2017, I'm just trying to understand that
yes,
vacancy piece. It's
after the police vacated, it was vacant.
vacant. Okay.
So it was purchased in, I think, November 2019. And they have put, again, very temporary tenancies in there simply to help in carrying the property prior to redevelopment.
These were last in I think 2012 or prior.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
2012.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. You know, I have no.
Thank you, Jeff. Stu?
Just a couple, your comparables at 755 Henderson.
Yes.
You have two. Are they main floor tenants, or are they? Do you know where they're located within that building?
I'm afraid I didn't put that down. So I don't recall, to be frank, whether they were main or second floor, but there's a full office, or rather a full elevator in that building.
Okay, and your vacancy rate, it's not really meant to reflect it being vacant for a time period or anything of that sort. You're relying strictly on a market vacancy that you've extrapolated from your information here. Is that correct? The 7% is a market vacancy as you see it versus the 5.5 that the city sees as a market vacancy?
That's right. I based our 7% on the market data as provided from the various active participants in the market. So in the chart that's presented to you there.
Yeah, so you're not looking at a chronic vacancy or anything of that sort. It's just sort of a disagreement between the city and you as to what the market vacancy is. Is that correct?
It's really not based on the subject being vacant from 2012. It was owned by the city. I can't say that, you know, it was vacant for that time, therefore it should have a higher vacancy. That's not my point. It's simply that market vacancy is higher than the 5.5. Seems to be around 7.
Okay, and finally, your cap rate. You're saying 6.25. The city says 6.2. So you're not really in disagreement on the cap rate. It's just you're using a round number based on what your comparables have shown. Is that correct?
It's based.
Whereas the city uses a model driven that comes to 6.2 versus 6.25.
Yes, as shown over the cycle, the city's model is somewhat different in this particular cycle. So it's giving some fairly exact capitalization rates of 6.55, 6.2%, etc. The cap rates that we presented in our chart at the bottom of 15 are the actual ones. They're rounded to the numbers shown there. Typically in valuation, unless there's very specific information, quarter point increments is what we're typically looking at. So 6.25% is, I think, fair for this property. It's relatively small, and you do see some owner occupants out there for these types of properties. So 6.25 seems to certainly be a fair cap rate for it.
Right, and you're also reflecting the redevelopment potential of the site in applying that, are you not?
I'll be very careful on this. Marginally, we've also acknowledged that there's additional land, and we are not in disagreement with the city's valuation of the additional land, so we've included that in our value. We're looking mainly at the subject property and the market for properties of that size, given the location, the build out on the above ground space, and some potential for it. Yes. So it's not so much the development potential in the future. That's not what we're valuing here today. It's what's present there today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So just to confirm, the issues seem to be the rent, the vacancy rate, and the 5%. Is that fair?
Yes.
Because the cap rate, Stu was right, the cap rate is very close.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions, and that concludes that matter. And now to the last one. Should we take a 10-minute break? Okay, I think we're going to have a 10-minute break, a recess. Thank you. I'll call the meeting back to order. Stu, can you hear us?
I can.
Thank you. The last item on the agenda is 865 Waverly. And just to confirm, it's the assessed value only? It is. Thank you. You may proceed.
This is file number 20-334, roll number 10000003800. Address is 865 Waverly Street. We have a 3-story office building with 8 premises. The actual year built and the effective year built are 2000. Okay, so we'll turn to page 2. So I have an aerial shot of the building at the corner of Wilkes and Waverly. 2 exterior photos, and I couldn't find any recent interior photos for this office building. So the request for information received, no subject sale history, and the subject property leases I'll go through when we get to the income and expense questionnaire. On page 4, I have the income stream for office. We have the 8 premises. We have a blended rate of $15.97 per square foot. Some of the tenants are medical, and we have a vacancy loss of 5.5%, expenses at 2%, shortfall at 7%, and an overall capitalization rate of 6.55%. So we have an estimated value of $10,285,000. So on page 5, I have my rent comparables. The top comparables, the 10 of them are office comparables. I tried to get close to the subject property. Some located on Waverly, one's on Marion, Buffalo, and Pembina. The average of these is $14.76 and $14.75. So I did also include some medical, just because some of the tenants were medical, and I have 8 comparables on Lorimer. So Lorimer would be a newer building, so the rents would be obviously higher. These average at $21.25 and a median at $22. So page 6 is the income value summary. 7 is the capitalization rates, and 8 is the Municipal Assessment Act. And then on page 9, I have included the 2017 income and expense questionnaire. So we have listed, they didn't check off if it's fully owner occupied or partially. We have income is net. We have a net operating income of $763,935. We have, it says there's also some parking stalls, which they charge a monthly rate for, and a vacant space at 5.05%. On page 11, I have the list of tenants. We have units 104, 101, and 104 is listed twice. Those would be medical. It says they're net leases, and then a few are listed as step-ups. And then on page 13 is the 2020 Board of Vision addenda that everybody's gone over. I'd just like to point out that the net operating income on the mailer is about $90,000 higher than what we have listed. And then the other thing was that this was appealed in 2020 by a different applicant, and it was withdrawn. So my recommendation today is to maintain the 2020 assessed value of the $10,285,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, questions?
Yes, just to the last point there. So the property has been previously appealed in the 2018 cycle, correct? And was reduced at that time frame.
That would have been in 2018, and I'm just talking about 2020.
Right. So in 2020, the property was appealed by the owner?
I'm not sure who, I would assume the owner appealed it, and it was just a different applicant defending it.
Okay, so I'll wait until I present, I guess, to discuss that aspect. The information in the income and expense mailer. So you had stated that it was all, well, and correct me if I'm wrong, you may not have, did you state that it was all net in the building?
That's what they checked off on page 9, and then on page 11, they checked off net on a few of them except for 103 and the lower level tenant. Yes.
Right. So then when we dig into it a bit deeper and we look at the owner occupied space, so KGS, Consamini, Grauman, Smith, McMillan, Inc. We look at the various spaces there. There is no additional recoveries, right? So that would indicate that their rents are gross, correct?
Yes, there's also a bit of confusion with their owner occupied. I did company searches, and there is similarities, but there is other people on the business or is it yes, the business has, half of them are connected to the building and the other half are not. So,
Okay, I'll discuss that probably in my presentation as well, just to clarify. But to be clear, there are direct correlations between the ownership of the property and the ownership of the operating business, correct?
there is about 4 tenants out of the 8, or 4 people out of the 8 for the business
Right.
that are linked to the building, yes.
Looking at the rental comparables on page number 5. So the top 2 are in close proximity, 1080 and 1150 Waverly, and they're at $13 and $14 a square foot. There's a number here from 1345 Waverly Street. So that would be the property on the southwest corner of Waverly and Gildery, correct? And the dominant tenancy there, taking up much of the building, is Investors Group, correct? Okay. So some of these full floor rents, 12,000 plus, 7,800 square feet, 7,700 roughly. Those are likely Investors Group, correct? So a full build out spec for investors.
None of my tenants at that building are investors.
Okay. But we haven't seen the interior of that particular property.
No.
Okay. Then looking at the comps at the bottom of page number 5. So this is Sterling Lion Medical Center, correct? Newly built in 2012. So that would be located on the north side of Sterling Lion at the intersection of Lorimer. So just to the east of the IKEA concentration of retail, and in that between there and Waverly.
Yes.
So that property would have certainly a higher profile, would it not, in terms of its location with regard to the retail area?
It would be closer to the retail, but it's also, this is also a very good location at the corner of Waverly and Wilkes. So I would say it would just be a newer building. I think that would be the biggest thing for this, is a newer medical, in a strictly medical building, yes.
So, and being newer and nicer, it would typically draw higher rents, would it not?
I would think they would be higher, yes.
Okay, so if we look at the, pardon me, if we look at the newer rents there, they're in the $22 a square foot range generally. And we're looking at, when I went through the tenancy list there, we're looking at Western Surgery Center, a medical clinic, Sterling Lion Pediatrics, Otolaryngology Associates of Winnipeg, Amenity Healthcare, Clinical Psychology, Manitoba, Unicity Lab, X-Ray, Helix Hearing, Sterling Periodontics. So pretty extensive medical.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Reflecting on your rent comparables, in terms of location, it's like comp 1 and comp 2, 2 Waverly properties would be closest to subject property. But it looks like the effective year is quite a bit older, and the square foot is quite a bit smaller.
Yes.
Which of these properties in your mind is most comparable?
Well, I picked the ones that were closer just because they were closest, and even though they are a bit smaller, because there is some units broken up in this one that are not as big as the 20, like the big leaseable area, the 25,000 square feet. 1345 Waverly is like another 3-story building. So that would be more similar in, I think, size. It's closer in, well, not perfect, but close in age. So that would probably be the most similar, I would think.
So your rent rate is then, is it model driven?
So all the rental rates here are modeled.
Yes. I have other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Stu?
Just staying with your rent comps, comparable number 9, 895 Waverly. I see that was a 2014 lease and it was for 2 years. Do you have a more current lease for that?
For that one, we do not. And I didn't look further into the more recent income and expense questionnaires. I just used our comparable search, and that's what had come up.
Okay, and excuse me, are any of these rent comparables, are any of them leasable basement areas?
I didn't include my basement rents, but I can speak to the fact that they range from about $8 to $12, depending on if they're a bi-level and what type of finish they have, with an average being around $9 for a basement. And I would point, like, I obviously don't have it here, but there's some located on Buffalo that I know about that I've been in that are bi-level, and those would kind of be the nicer ones because they were bi-level, and those would be, again, between $8 to $12 for basement.
Okay, and you've used actually 1242 for the basement for the subject.
Yes.
And is that a bi-level type basement?
I'm not sure. So I haven't been in this building, so I was a little unsure about why that was the way it was, but I would have to inspect further to, I couldn't speak to what the basement quality is here because I haven't been in this building. This is just what was done by a previous assessor.
Okay, I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I have no questions. Trevor, you can proceed.
Okay, so just to clarify ownership, so KGS Group, the engineering firm, they bought and developed this property for their own needs, both at that time and future. So they overbuilt for the size they were with some additional space to be leased on the market, but the main intent was for them to occupy the building for their own office needs. The ownership between the KGS operating group and the numbered company that owns the property is unquestionable. The ownership is the same between the two, so it is a non-arm's length situation between the tenancy of KGS and the ownership of the property. So in looking at the income and expense form, you can see that they have themselves in there on a gross rental basis as noted in the income and expense forms. They may have incorrectly checked off whether it was net or not. In the filing of this, they're relatively new to paying attention to the assessment of their property. So they were in the learning phase at the time of completing this, and obviously mistakes can be made in checking off boxes or not. So it's not a fully net property on that basis. By and large, the arm's length tenancies are, but obviously KGS itself is not. So let's get into the property itself. The basement space is a full basement space. It's not a half basement space. It's not a bi-level. It's a basement space. There are no It's not windowed, it's fully below ground. The interesting thing with this building, and we'll get back to the photos and the layouts and that, but I'll take us forward to page number 14, and you can direct your attention to the tenancies here. So KGS occupies the entire second and third floor. It's really only the main floor that has any space that they lease out to other tenancies. So as you can see, that's a little over 25,000 square feet on those two floors. Then they have nearly a full basement space of 10,612 square feet. So they have over 36,000 square feet in this building, 3 full floors, and then they have an additional space of 1,800 square feet on the main floor that they are occupying as well. So bringing it up to 38,000 square feet. That is the layout or occupancy of the building. The other tenancies are all on the main floor. So let's flip back to my page number 1. KGS engaged me for the 2018 appeal of this property. The property was reduced from $9,654,000 to an assessment of $8,528,000 based on my exact value. I believe I've included the board order as well as my workup on that in the addenda if you need to see it. Subsequently in 2021, they decided to file on their own behalf. As the deadline loomed, they realized they didn't have the expertise to proceed with it, in that they did not have the market knowledge to make the case. So they ended up withdrawing it and subsequently hired me to represent them for the 2021 year. So that's the background with regard to the withdrawal of the appeal in the 2020 taxation year. So it wasn't that it was not followed through on. They simply didn't have the ability to do it, recognized that, and moved forward for the next year. If you look at the 2021 assessment versus the last cycle, we're looking at an over 20% increase in value, $1,757,000 up to the value of, or rather the assessed value of $10,285,000. The remainder of the detail is there for you. Zone C2 originally built in 2000, sitting on 2.1 acres with a leasable area of just under 47,000 square feet. We can move forward into the photos. We have the exteriors on page 2, top of page 3. Typical office space for KGS at the bottom of page 3. You can see out through the window that we're above ground on the second or third floor. Again, common meeting area for their space, and the typical layout of the open area spaces for them as shown on the bottom of page 4 and top of page 5. Indeed, page 4 is the basement space, so it is built out for them for use. They do have a loading area down there that's more storage, concrete floors, etc. But it is dominantly built out in this fashion. So it's highly unusual to have 10,000+ square feet of built out office space below ground. There aren't comps for that. You'll find some basement, rarely you'll find some basement space that has been rented out. There's probably ones on Buffalo, etc., but they will not be 10,000 square feet in size. Looking at a space such as this, getting somebody on the market to occupy a space such as this for 10,000 square feet, what are you going to get for a lease rate for that? It won't be $12. It will certainly be below that. The remainder of the photos are there for you. Page 5 is one of the medical tenants. You can see their front lobby. They've been there for some time. One of the vacant spaces at the top of 6 and the build out of it. And some of the others. Page 7 is another one of the medical tenancies, etc. And then standard office, top of page 8, and the interior hallway on the main floor, which provides access to some of the tenancies at the back of the building. So there are, as you're on Waverly, there's some tenants that are right at the front of the building. They pay a bit more in rent. Then there is a hallway that takes you to the back of the building, so no profile whatsoever, a bit hidden away. The spaces are not quite as nice, and they pay less in rent, and some of them are vacant. That's at the rear of the building. Pardon me. Further description on page 9. I'm not going to go through the detail. It's there for you. You've seen the photos. Site description is shown on page 10. You can see the layout with the exterior parking. They do have a long, narrow piece at the rear, which runs behind an adjacent retail development that they also utilize for parking. And then the location itself is shown on page number 11. So again, southwest corner of Waverly at Wilkes Avenue. The valuation itself, let's move forward to page 14 and get into the actual leases here. So again, KGS is on non-arm's length gross leases for their spaces. So I haven't reflected that because they're irrelevant essentially. We do have some main floor tenancies, and I've reflected those in here. We have a dental center at $19.50 a square foot, leased in 2016, just under 2,000 square feet. We have an insurance place that is only paying operating costs and property tax recoveries. As you look in the income and expense, that was confirmed to me. So obviously that's not market. We had to make a projection on that. We projected $17 for their space based on the build out and location of it. Unit 103, again, this is KGS. They are paying, in that space, they're paying $17 net. Again, non-arm's length, but they are paying 17 net in that space. As of 2016, the unit 104, another dental, a little over 2,000 square feet, leased in 2017, just over $17 a square foot. So you can see that they're drawing, oh, and then we have unit 107, 2018 lease of under 1,000 square feet at $15.91 a square foot. So you can see that those main floor tenancies are falling in that, call it $16 to $17 mainly, with one at $19.50 a square foot. So is that market? Let's find out. The other issue is the other KGS spaces. So we have them in the full basement, the second and third floor, and then the other couple of spaces. So you can see what we've projected for them there, and we can get to that as we go forward. Our rental comps, I think, are very strong for this property. If you move forward to page 15, you can see the rent comps that I have provided and the reasoning for those. So we tried to pick good quality comps, recent start dates for leases, and sizes that would be comparable to the subject. Obviously, age of construction is going to vary somewhat, but often the location and the build out can matter more than the date of construction. So let's look at what we have here. 1700 Corridon. Very well located on Corridon Avenue. You can see the photos on the next page. The top one is 1700 Corridon. This is a smaller office tenant of a little over 1,100 square feet, $16 a square foot in 2017. 1150 Waverly. Photo at the bottom, again on page 16. It's the second photo property that our firm property manages. $14 a square foot for that space, built or rather started in 2017. Very well located on Waverly, a bit further south than the subject property, but again north of McGilvery. 1260 Taylor, larger lease, obviously, to a financial institution, 51,000+ square feet, 2018 lease at $12 a square foot. Very well located on Taylor, all on a single floor. Bit of a different situation, but larger scale. KGS themselves, we're looking at floor plates of 12,700, total area occupied of roughly 38,000 square feet. 1,000 Waverly. So I think this is a particularly telling comp. We have a property located in very close proximity to the subject. I can point it out on our aerial if you wish. Another engineering firm occupying 25 or just under 25,000 square feet, 2018 lease at $15 a square foot. Excellent comp. The other one I would point to in terms of size, size of the lease and quality of the building would be the number 1 Research Road. This is in the Research Park at University of Manitoba. We have an office tenancy there, just under 23,000 square feet, paying $15 a square foot. So large scale leases, very new leases, good quality space, paying $15 a square foot. The remainder of them, as you can see, again, very well located, typically in that same area. Some of them fall lower, and you can see the photos of each of those. I am happy to go through each of these if you have any questions on them. But in terms of establishing a rental rate for KGS, I would certainly look at the two that I pointed out in particular, as well as 1260 Taylor. The remainder of them, if you look at the rental rates charged and the locations of them, I think that the rates being paid by the tenancies on the main floor of the property are certainly in line with the market. The question then is, what's applicable to how big is our space in the basement? 10,612 square feet of open floor plan, fully basement space. It's built out. There's no question there's value to it in that way. I can tell you that it would be an enormous challenge to find an arm's length tenant to go into that much space in a basement as an office space, willing to pay an office rent. So $850 a square foot seems more than appropriate for that. So that is what we have used as our projected rents. We feel that the in-place rents are certainly supported by the market in the area. Again, if we look at the city's medical comparable, the Sterling Lion Medical Center, built in 2012, brand new space, very shiny, beautiful building located just to the east of that IKEA Power Center with other high cube new office space right beside it. But that's going to draw higher rents than the subject will itself. The rents that they're getting on the main floor of 17 through 1950 are reflective of the space that they're leasing. So moving on from that, page number 19, again, we have the statistics for the market space. Winnipeg really doesn't have Class A space. The subject would be a Class Class B suburban building. We have average rents of $15.07 on a net basis in the Class B suburban market, according to our Cushman and Wakefield brokerage. So looking at that, as well as the comps, we've applied $15 net to the KGS space. I've given you the reasoning for the basement. We have also applied $17 a square foot to the unit where the tenant is only paying operating costs and property tax recoveries, and the unit 105, due to location and condition, we've applied $15 a square foot to that unit. Subject does generate parking revenue of $82,500 at full occupancy. We have included this in our valuation. Moving on to page 20, our vacancy stats are the same. Pardon me. If we look at Class B suburban, we're looking at between 3.9% up to 6.7%, according to the three national brokerages who track these things. We felt that the city's vacancy rate of 5.5% is certainly applicable to the subject, so we've deferred to that. The expense argument remains the same. I trust that everybody's aware of that, and I will leave that in your hands. Our shortfall allowance, you look at the bottom of page 21, just to point out the difference here. We had operating expenses without property management in the reference year equal to $10.88 a square foot. We're not asking for an increase in the shortfall. We're deferring to the city's $7 a square foot. But I would note that the actual is considerably higher than that. Capitalization rate, if you look again at the chart on page 22, we've again covered the prominent national brokerages in our market. If you look at the ranges, Cushman and Wakefield is between 6.75 and 7.5%, 6.75 being the low. Colliers at 6.5 to 7.25%, CBRE at 7 to 7.5% for a suburban Class B property. Now the city has a 6.55% rate on the subject property. They're at the very bottom of the range. We have a property that is dominantly owner occupied. The question of whether that tenancy would remain in place over the long term when it occupies, call it 3/4 of the building, would create questions in the mind of any investor on a long-term basis. Would they be able to effectively fill that space quickly when we have full floor plates on the second and third floor, as well as the basement space? That alone will drive a higher cap rate than the city is at. Balancing that, we have a good location. It's a quality building. So it's not going to fall towards the upper end of those ranges at the 7.5, 7.25 range. So we presented our comparables at the bottom. Again, they range in size, age, location, etc., but it gives you an indication of the market. We have applied what I feel would be the low end of the range at 6.75% for the subject, low being the most aggressive cap rate that would be applied to it as of the valuation date. So if we flip forward to page 23, you can see our valuation versus the city's valuation in the center versus the city's valuation in 2018. And the differences there. So our rental income, based on our projected rents, as well as the in-place rents, plus the parking income, brings us to the gross potential of $739,547. Applying the vacancy, expense allowance, and shortfall, we come to a net income of $631,898. Again, entirely based on market data. Capitalizing this at the aggressive rate of 6.75% gives us a market value of $9,361,000. And if you flip back to my page number 1, you can see that this is a considerable rise over the reduced 2018 assessment of $8,528,000. Much more in line with what market would reflect over a 2-year period for a property such as this. The addenda materials include the income and expense. They include the decision from the prior cycle of 2018, as well as my material on that. And then the market stats and our background with regard to the re-inclusion of the full 7% expense allowance. That is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany, questions?
Yes, I know you said the owner had withdrawn it. Were you aware that it was an authorization of Altus that withdrew the 2020 deal?
I know that the CFO of the local group went to school with somebody from Altus and had them review it. They made the KGS, to my knowledge, made the application on their own. That was my discussions with them in the days prior to the submission deadline in June of that year. So if they subsequently engaged Altus and withdrew it, that's it was my discussions with, again, the individual that would have been handling it directly were such that they were handling it themselves. So.
And I know you've stated it's owner occupied, and I did check the previous mailers, and they've never checked off that they're owner occupied, and even in the future they haven't. And then after doing the company searches, there is, for the tenants that's the owner, there is 4 people versus the 4 people who own the building. So would it be 100% owner occupied? And is that not why they've been checking it off and still don't?
I really couldn't tell you why they have or have not checked off owner occupied, but it is irrelevant. It's not in question. It is KGS bought, develops, and occupies the property for their own group. It's like a law firm, right? There's various people that own the law firm, and then they have their numbered company or whatever that owns the property itself. You can see the common ownership there. It's not that there's different investors in it. It's the shareholders of KGS itself, the internal shareholders. So there's no question that it's owner occupied and that they're one and the same.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff? Stu?
Yeah, just a couple. You stated that they were relatively new at completing the I&E, but did you mean the person that did it this time? Because the company has owned the building since it was built in 2000, is that correct?
Yes, they have. So what I actually stated was that they're relatively new to looking at their assessment and assessment appeal, not that they were new to filling out their I&E. I'm not entirely sure what their background on filling out the I&E is. I believe the city could probably better answer that aspect for you.
Okay, and that's okay. On page 10, the building to the south of that property, that's no affiliation at all?
It's not.
But there is a shared access from Waverly for that? Looks like it is from the photo anyway.
So if you look at page number 10, there is, so that is the A&W site, as well as that strip mall at the back that has, there's a restaurant in there, and I can't
Right.
Tendencies right now. So
I think it's called Bellissimo.
that's the one, yes.
Okay.
Excellent Italian food. I believe there's 2 accesses to that. So if you look at the south end of that property, where that blue line is, that's probably the main entryway
Okay,
to that particular retail strip. But, and I'm trying to remember if it's fenced off on the north side of A&W or not, but it's not coming to mind. I don't know if I have that in the photos here. I don't have it in the photos, so.
okay. That's fine. And the building itself, does it have an elevator?
It does.
Okay. And then just go to your comps on page 14, I believe. Just get there. Oh, no, not your comps, your actual unit 102, and perhaps I missed this, but there's an insurance tenant, and they're paying only op costs and property tax recoveries. So you're suggesting that that was a semi-gross reported lease?
They,
And
the information on the INE and in discussions with is that they are only paying currently only paying operating costs and property tax recoveries as of the valuation, you know, the INE valuation timeframe. Pardon me. Obviously, that's not market. So we have made a projection based on what we see as market, as well as what other tenants on that main floor in similar size and build out space are paying.
I see. So you didn't try and net it out from what was reported. You just used a comparable.
There was no, well, so it would be negative because they're only paying operating costs. There was no rent whatsoever. And I can't make a valuation based on no rent being paid for a space. So if I go to the INE.
So is this an affiliated company then?
It's not, no. I believe they had a challenge with that space. I don't have the full background on it, but I'm reflecting the fact that it's not anywhere remotely close to market by applying a market rental rate of $17 to it.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll go to your comps on the next page, page 15.
Yeah.
Comp number 3, 1260 Taylor.
Right.
Is that not a call center?
It is a call center, yes.
So would the finish on that would not be comparable to the subject property necessarily, would it?
It would and it wouldn't, in that if I'll get you to flip back to our photos of the subject. So if you look at the second and third floors of the subject property, they have some degree of built out office space on the perimeter, not the whole perimeter, with the remainder of the floor being wide open floor office space. So if you look at, and I hope I have a good photo of this. So the top of page 5 is second and third floor open area office space with, as you can see, a corner office at the end there. And then while page 4 is in the basement, that is what their open office area is like on the second and third floors as well, in terms of build out. Same ceiling and flooring and cubicles, etc.
Okay, let me just get back to the comps here.
But that one on Taylor is roughly double, well, a little less than double the size, so it would probably have a lower rent than the subject.
Right, and then your comp number 8, 920 Lorimer, is that, do you know who the occupant of that is?
I didn't note down specifically which tenancy that is, but if we look at my photo of 920 Lorimer at the bottom of page 17, you can see the frontage of it there. So 920 Lorimer is the high cube flex space located and developed at the same time, actually immediately adjacent to that Sterling Lyon Medical Center. It's immediately north of that. So you have tenancies in there that are more retail oriented, such as flooring places. There's a gym. There's various things like that, paying more retail rates. There is more dermatology oriented ones. There's the Prota Clinic. I do not remember which one this is, but it was, I believe it was chosen because it was office space and not retail.
Right, but it wouldn't have the same exposure as the subject property. Would you agree with that?
It is slightly more removed from a main thoroughfare, but again, if you look at the frontage of this and the tenancies that are located in there, as well as the signage that's out front, it's an excellent location and an excellent product, driving premium rates.
And then finally, just a question here. You've page 23, I think it is. Sorry, let me get to page 23. No, it's not page 23. I'm sorry, this is.
No problem.
But you've included the city's 2018 valuation. And what are you trying to show with that? What's the purpose of including that?
I think it's informative to look at the property over time. Obviously, we can't go forward in time to leases in 2020 or post-reference sales or anything like that, none of which we have on the subject property, by the way. But looking back in time, we have a property that was previously appealed in the 2018 timeframe. The city had valued it at $9,654,000. It was reduced to $8,528,000, which was the exact valuation that I brought forward to the panel at that time, based on the exact same type of valuation scenario and methodology I'm using here today. I think looking at the fact that was reduced at 9.6 to 8.5. Now the city's jumped to 10.3 million roughly. I think it's informative for the panel to be aware of the background of the property rather than treating it as a one-off each and every time that we come forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I just have one observation on page 23 on the top of your tables. You've got the 2020 assessment, not 2021.
Or
I think that's a typo error.
Yes. Thank you for catching that.
Okay, that was my only item. Thank you very much. That concludes both this property and the hearing.
Thank you.